In the cold city of London, amid the towering glass skyscrapers gleaming with power, a man who seemed to have everything was faced with an emptiness nothing could fill. An unexpected encounter with a child bearing amber eyes, and the woman he once lost, tore apart that icy shell. From that moment, a family divided by lies and prejudice stood before a choice: to endure in silence, or to stand together against the world, to protect the truth. This is not only a love story, but also a journey of affirming the value of honesty, family, and the belief that love can overcome every wall of discrimination. The February east wind slashed through Canary Wharf like a thin blade, sweeping across the rows of glass high-rises blazing with electric light. Office workers hurried out of the buildings, clutching their coats tight, heads ducked against the wind, muttering complaints about London's cold that came without a single sun ray. But Edward Hawthorne stood still at the foot of his headquarters, like a dark statue reflecting the glow of the streetlights. Hawthorne Global, the name shining at the top of the tower, was the child Edward had raised with blood and loneliness. At 45, he owned a financial empire spanning 3 continents, commanding figures that bankers spoke of with caution. A single phone call from him could stir the bond market, and one nod of his head could decide the fate of thousands of employees. Outsiders saw a victorious man, surrounded by luxury, fine cars, and elite soirees. But when standing before the glass façade reflecting all of London's dazzling lights, Edward saw nothing but a suffocating void. That emptiness seemed deeper than usual tonight, perhaps because the newspapers would spread the news of his engagement tomorrow morning to Clarissa Wells, the daughter of an old banking dynasty. A strategic alliance, the board of directors called it. Clarissa had icy beauty, the polished elegance bred into her since childhood, and an ambition no less fierce than Edward's. A model marriage among the elite, power joining power, wealth paired with wealth. On paper, everything was perfect. But inside Edward, the closest word to describe his feeling was drowning in his glory. He reached for a cigarette, then stopped. He had quit nearly a decade ago, but in moments like this, the craving flared violently. Shoving his hands into his pockets, he tilted his head back, staring at the Hawthorne Global Tower, its green-tinted windows reflecting thousands of lights. A monument to success, a prison without escape. "Uncle," the child's voice rang out clearly against the howling wind. Edward jerked around. Before him stood a little girl of about 8, barely reaching his hip. She had bronze-brown skin, naturally curly hair loosely tied at the back, a few strands whipping free in the wind. But her eyes froze Edward. Amber, glowing with flecks of gold, as if scraps of sunlight had been left behind in the winter night of London. "You look really sad." She tilted her head, her gaze steady and fearless. "Are you lost? Do you want to come home with me? Mommy says lonely hearts need healing. She also makes the best hot chocolate in the world. 1 cup and you won't be sad anymore." Edward was stunned. How long had it been since anyone asked if he was sad? How long since people looked past the success, the status, the power, and saw the emptiness within? He cleared his throat, his voice rough. "I'm not lost. I know exactly where I am." The girl frowned, as if dissatisfied with the answer. Then she asked, with childlike innocence that cut to the core, "Then do you know who you are?" The question was a blade, stabbing the place Edward kept buried. For an instant, he felt a crack in the ice around his heart. The ice formed through years of climbing with blood and betrayal, the price of reaching the top of this glass tower. Before he could answer, a woman's voice called out, urgent and worried, "Sienna, you're running off again. I told you to wait right there." Edward turned, and his heart stopped. The woman running toward them in the London wind was Amara Bennett, the woman he had once loved beyond reason, the one who slipped from his grasp on a bitter morning 10 years ago. Amara was no longer the poor art student she once was. Now, she carried a mature, striking beauty. Smooth bronze skin, black hair falling to her shoulders, a wine-colored coat hugging a graceful yet unpretentious figure. But her eyes that same deep amber as her daughter's still left. Edward reeling. "Edward." Amara halted, his name falling from her lips like a secret dropped by mistake. "Amara." His reply was hoarse, his throat dry. Little Sienna looked from her mother to Edward, eyes shining. "Mommy, this is the sad man I told you about. I said he needs your hot chocolate." Amara placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her eyes locked on Edward. In an instant, memories surged, nights curled up together in a shabby flat, bursts of laughter, fiery arguments, and the morning she left without a word. All of it crashed down, stealing her breath. "We knew each other." Amara's voice trembled. "How long ago?" Sienna asked curiously. A heavy silence hung. Edward and Amara stared at one another. Both saw that final night again, the promises unkept, the tears buried away. "A long time ago, sweetheart," Amara said, steadying her tone. Edward looked at Sienna longer. The more he studied her, the harder his heart pounded. That small face bore features hauntingly familiar. The jawline, the delicate nose, even the faint smile. It was like looking into a mirror of memory. A terrifying yet sweet thought flashed. She could be my daughter. He knelt to her level, voice unsteady. "What's your full name, little one?" The girl answered with bright confidence. "Amara Bennett. I'm 8 years old, in 3rd grade. I love painting like Mommy, and I can even read chapter books." 8 years old. The number struck Edward like a church bell. 8 years since Amara vanished from his life. 8 years since their last desperate, blazing night together. He looked up. Amara's gaze was taut, wary, yet behind it roared a sea of restrained emotion. Edward's chest clenched. He wanted to ask, to cry out, but his lips only quivered. "Amara, is she? We have to go." Amara cut him off, pulling her daughter's hand. "Thank you for talking with Sienna." Sienna glanced back, worry in her eyes. "You're still really sad. I can see it." Edward forced a faint smile, voice as steady as he could make it. "You've made me much happier already, Sienna. Thank you." The girl beamed. "See, Mommy? Everyone needs someone to care about them." Amara pulled her away, but after a few steps, Edward called out, his voice trembling, "Amara, wait." She froze, but didn't turn. Her shoulders squared, body tense as if bracing for a blow. I want to talk, just for a minute." This time, Amara turned. Her eyes held memories, pain, loss, and something fleeting, almost like longing. "There's nothing left to say, Edward. That was another life." "Is it really?" he asked, despite the quiver in his voice. Her gaze softened for a heartbeat, then steeled again. She whispered, "Goodbye, Edward." She gripped her daughter's hand and disappeared into the bustling crowd. Edward stood frozen. His phone buzzed non-stop messages from Clarissa, from the organizers of tomorrow's event, but he ignored them. The cold wind shrieked through the glass streets, yet inside his chest, a fire had just been lit, wild and dangerous. A child with amber eyes had shattered the walls he had built for 10 years. A woman who once was his whole world had returned, carrying a secret that could redefine everything. Edward no longer felt himself standing on the peak of the glass tower. He was falling, and he was awake to feel the fall for the first time in years. 3 days after the unexpected encounter in front of the glass tower, Amara Bennett still hadn't regained her calm. She stood alone in the small gallery in Shoreditch, her eyes fixed on the painting hanging in the center of the room. It was a piece she had painted 2 years ago. A man standing in the shadows, his face blurred, only his broad shoulders sinking under heavy strokes of blue and grey. She had titled it, "The Stranger." At the time, Amara hadn't thought much, only sought to pour out a longing that refused to die. But now, looking again, she saw clearly that man was Edward Hawthorne. 10 years, a decade to forget, build walls around her heart, and tell herself that young love was just a fleeting intoxication. Yet only 5 minutes of seeing him again had brought every wall crashing down. His eyes, deep blue like the night sea, were still there. And beside him, her 8-year-old daughter had stripped every hiding place from the truth. "You're staring at the sad painting again." Sienna's voice rang behind her, bright and mischievous. Amara turned, finding her daughter perched on a high chair, both hands smeared with colors from her crayon box. "I'm not staring, just thinking." Amara smiled. "You're thinking about the sad man, aren't you?" Sienna tilted her head. "I am too. Do you think he's had hot chocolate yet?" "Probably not, because he still looked really lonely that day. Amara swallowed hard. This child had Edward's eyes, not the color, but the way they pierced straight through the empty spaces adults tried to hide. There are some kinds of sadness that hot chocolate can't cure, sweetheart, Amara said softly, sitting beside her. Then what can? The innocent question cut like a knife. Amara drew a deep breath, stroking her daughter's hair. Time and forgiveness. Sienna nodded thoughtfully, then asked with open curiosity, Mommy, do you love him, the sad man? Amara's heart tightened. She had known this day would come when her daughter would be old enough to ask, sharp enough to notice, but knowing didn't mean she was ready. That's a grown-up matter, Sienna, but I'm almost 9, and you always say feelings aren't something to be ashamed of. So do you love him? Amara fell silent. 10 years ago, that love had been everything. But it had also crushed her, leaving wounds that never healed. At last, she sighed. Yes. I once loved him very much. Then why aren't you together? Again, Amara faced the ruthless innocence of a child. How could she explain the deceitful phone calls, the shadow of Clarissa Wells, the desolation of being abandoned when Edward chose his company over her? Because sometimes love isn't enough, Amara whispered. There are paths two people simply can't walk together. Sienna was quiet for a moment, then declared with rare conviction, I don't believe that. If two people love each other, they'll find a way back. Just like the way the sad man looked at you. I saw it. Amara held her tight, torn between tenderness and fear. This child would break her heart repeatedly, simply because she was her father's mirror, believing with the same foolish conviction that love could conquer everything. On Friday afternoon, the doorbell rang as the gallery thinned of visitors. Amara looked up, and her heart lurched. Edward stood at the threshold. He was no longer the cold CEO in a tailored suit. His hair was disheveled, his tie loosened, his deep blue eyes weary yet alight the instant they met hers. Amara. His voice was hoarse, weighted with 1,000 sleepless nights. I want to see your paintings. Her trembling hand clenched. How did you know I was here? I searched. For 10 years, I never stopped searching. Amara reeled. For a decade, she had told herself the story that Edward betrayed her, that he had chosen Clarissa and power over love. Yet with one sentence, the foundation of her belief shook. Before she could respond, Sienna burst out from the back room, exclaiming, Sad man, you really came? Do you want hot chocolate? Edward dropped to one knee, smiling at her, his eyes glimmering with emotions Amara dared not name. Hello again, Sienna. I'd love to, if your mother agrees. Say yes, Mommy. Sienna tugged at Amara's hand, eyes shining. Amara sighed, helpless. Go wash your hands first. They're covered in crayon. When Sienna ran to the kitchen, Amara finally faced Edward. The distance between them was heavy. She's wonderful, Edward murmured. You've raised her beautifully. Amara cut him off, voice cold. Don't use her to win me over. She has nothing to do with you. Nothing to do? Edward's fists tightened. Amara, you know the truth. She's my daughter, isn't she? Amara's heart pounded wildly. The denial stuck in her throat. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, that if Edward ever asked, she would deny him without flinching. But looking into those blue eyes, she could not lie. You abandoned me, she whispered. That morning, I got a call from a woman claiming to be your assistant. She said you were engaged to Clarissa Wells and that what we had was just a game. I had no choice but to leave. Edward froze. Assistant? Amara, I had no personal assistant back then. That morning, I was going to propose to you. She staggered into a chair, the world spinning. No, that's impossible. From his inner pocket, he pulled out a worn velvet box. He opened it. Inside lay a simple yet exquisite ring. I've carried this for 10 years. I wanted to tell you that without you, every success meant nothing. But when I woke, you were gone. Tears spilled down Amara's cheeks. For a decade, she had believed a lie, raising their child alone in bitterness. Small footsteps pattered back. Sienna held out a steaming cup. Here, Drink this, then you won't be sad anymore." Edward took it, his hand trembling. He looked at Amara, voice rough. "We need to talk. About everything. About her. About the years we lost." Amara wiped her tears, steadying her tone. "Tomorrow. When Sienna's at school," Edward nodded. Before leaving, he said softly, "I never stopped loving you, Amara. Not for a single day." The door closed, leaving Amara trembling among her canvases, knowing the wall she had built for 10 years had finally cracked open. The next morning, London's sky was blanketed by a thick layer of grey clouds. Wind from the Thames swept through rows of old brick houses, carrying a damp, icy chill. Amara walked Sienna to the gates of her elementary school, then stood still, watching her daughter blend into the stream of children. When she turned back, she saw Edward waiting at the corner of the street, dressed in a navy overcoat. He didn't wave, didn't call only, watched silently. "Let's talk," Amara said, her voice low but firm. They chose a small cafe in Shoreditch, the Willow Cafe, with a few familiar faces. Their table was by the window, where dim light filtered through fogged glass. Edward set the old ring box on the table. Without preamble, he looked straight at Amara. "I need to know, why did you believe that lie?" Amara held her cup, her fingers trembling slightly. "You think I wanted to believe it?" That morning, the phone rang. A polite, firm female voice. She said you were about to announce your engagement to Clarissa Wells, that I was just on the sidelines. She even emphasized, "If you wish, we can provide financial support for you to step away." Tell me, how else was I supposed to take it? Edward's grip on his mug tightened until his knuckles turned white. That was Clarissa. It could only have been her. I never had a personal assistant back then. But Amara, you should have asked me directly. At least once. Amara let out a hollow laugh. Directly? When I went to the hotel, your room was empty. You were gone. I waited for hours, and all the while, that woman's words echoed in my head. "Do you know what it feels like to be abandoned while carrying a child inside you?" Edward's throat tightened. He lowered his head, voice hoarse. "I'm sorry. That morning, I rushed back to the office for an emergency meeting. I meant to return right after, have breakfast with you, and give you the ring. But in just those few short hours, everything shattered. The air between them grew heavy. Outside, people hurried under the drizzle. Amara clenched her fist. For 10 years, I hated you, and I hated myself. For not having the courage to stay, for letting pride kill my hope. And all that time, I raised Sienna, your daughter, telling myself she didn't need a father." Edward raised his head, eyes damp. She's everything I ever dreamed of. And I missed every day of the first 8 years of her life. Do you understand how that feels?" Amara shot back. "And what about me? I was a single mother, juggling every bill, working side jobs, and painting at night to pay the rent. While you sat atop Canary Wharf, moving markets with a single call. Do you even grasp how wide the gap between us was?" Edward sat still, then whispered, "I did. And because I thought about it too much, I went mad searching for you. I hired investigators and chased every lead. But you vanished from London, changed your number, sold the old flat. It was like chasing a ghost. Only when I saw Sienna on the pavement last week did I finally understand. A part of my soul had never left." Amara felt another crack in the barricade around her heart. But she didn't let him see it. "So what do you want now?" "I want to be a father," Edward said, his voice steady. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, but I'm asking for the right to be with Sienna and make amends. And," he hesitated, "I want a chance for us. To try again." Amara gave a bitter laugh. "Try again? You think it's that easy? Those 10 years never happened. All the nights I cried alone, all the times Sienna asked, 'Where's my dad?' and I had to lie to her, all of that disappears with one apology." "No," Edward replied, his blue eyes burning with resolve. "Not one apology. I'll do anything. I know how much I've lost. But Amara, this love has never died." Silence settled. Only the patter of rain against the window filled the space. Amara closed her eyes, exhaustion sinking deep into her bones. "We need time. And most of all, We need to think of Sienna. She's lived her whole life without a father. If you show up now, she'll be overjoyed. But if you disappear again, she'll break. Do you understand? Edward nodded firmly. I won't disappear. Even if I lose everything, the company, the reputation, the money, I'll stay. For you, for our daughter. As he said it, the look in his eyes left Amara unable to doubt. But still, she whispered, you once chose power over me. I'm not sure you'll be different this time. Edward clasped her hand, gentle but unyielding. I've learned the costliest lesson of my life. Power without family is nothing but a golden prison. Don't condemn me forever for one mistake born of manipulation. Amara trembled. She wanted to pull her hand back, but couldn't. Tears slipped down, hot and heavy. I'm so tired, Edward. Tired of being strong alone for too long, he murmured. Let me carry it with you. In that moment, the walls Amara had built for 10 years wavered. But she still managed to step back, her voice raw. All right. Tomorrow afternoon, after school, you can come. Meet Sienna officially, but only as Mommy's friend. Not yet, as her father. Edward nodded, hope blazing in his eyes. I'll wait. If it means being one step closer, I'll wait a lifetime. The next afternoon, the rain had stopped. The London sky was still grey, but pale light filtered through the clouds, enough to lend a touch of warmth. Amara stood at the school gate with the other parents, a red umbrella in her hand, her heart tangled like a knot. Edward appeared tall in his navy overcoat in the distance, standing out against the crowd. When he spotted Amara, he stopped. He didn't approach too close, as if to respect the distance she had set. The bell rang. The gates opened. Sienna came running out, eyes shining like lamps. When she saw Edward, she shouted, "Sad man." Several parents turned, curious. Amara gave a faint nod permission. Edward crouched down, opening his arms. "Hello, Sienna." His voice caught as the small arms wrapped around his neck. I'm so happy to see you." Sienna beamed. "Today I drew a picture with you in it. You were standing next to me and Mommy. The teacher said it was a family portrait." Amara's chest tightened, but Edward only smiled, eyes glistening. "I'd love to see it." That afternoon, in Amara's small second-floor flat, Sienna spread the drawing on the table. 3 figures standing in front of a house, hand in hand, a rainbow arching above them. Edward studied it long before murmuring, "This is the most beautiful picture I've ever seen." "Even prettier than Mommy's paintings?" Sienna asked, eyes sparkling. Edward looked at Amara, his gaze holding 1,000 unspoken words. "They're different. Your Mum's paintings are delicate, but this one has a whole heart inside." Satisfied, Sienna grinned, then asked innocently, "Do you want to stay for dinner? Mommy makes the best spaghetti." Amara was about to refuse, but Edward looked at her, hope shining. She gave a slight nod. Dinner was simple. The little kitchen was filled with the scent of tomato sauce and basil. Sienna chatted about school while Edward listened intently, asking questions that made her giggle. Amara sat across, watching. Something about it felt natural. Edward bent close to hear every little detail and laughed at Sienna's silly faces. Memories stirred. Late-night dinners in their old flat, cheap pizza, and big dreams. When Sienna finished eating, she ran to fetch a picture book. "Read to me, please. Mommy always does, but I want to hear your voice." Edward froze, glancing at Amara as if asking permission. She nodded. He opened the book, his voice deep, warm, and melodic. Sienna leaned against his shoulder, eyes growing heavy. Amara sat across, silent, watching. The scene was tender and piercing. For years, Sienna had missed this. A father's arms, a bedtime story in his voice. When the story ended, Sienna was asleep. Edward carried her to her room with a gentleness that looked like he feared breaking the most precious thing in his life. Returning, he paused at the doorway, eyes shining. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me this chance." Amara folded her arms. "Don't thank me yet. You have a lot to prove." Sienna grows attached quickly, but she breaks just as quickly. "If you disappoint her—" "I won't," Edward cut in, voice firm. Silence fell. Outside, the wind rustled over the rooftops. Amara felt her heart waver. "Tomorrow," she said slowly. "You can pick her up after school, but only if I come with you." Edward nodded, lips trembling with restrained emotion. "I'll be there, every day, if you'll let me." That night, lying alone in bed, Amara stared at the dark ceiling. Her mind replayed the image of Edward reading to their daughter, the look in his eyes so full of love. She knew the road ahead would be fraught with trials. But deep down, she also knew a new chapter had begun. The invitation arrived on a light, rainy morning. An ivory envelope, thick paper, gold-embossed letters, Great Ormond Street Charity Gala. Amara hesitated when her eyes reached the last line. Guest of Edward Hawthorne. Amara quietly supported the Children's Hospital Fund through her auctioned paintings for years. However, to attend with Edward and appear publicly before London's financial and artistic elite was different. That was a declaration. Beatrice Langford, her older and outspoken friend, exclaimed when she saw the card, "You can't refuse, Amara, not because of Edward, but because of you. You've built a career on your own. You have the right to stand in any room without bowing your head." Amara said nothing. But that night, when she tried on the new navy blue dress she had bought, elegant, fitted, yet understated, she saw in the mirror a different woman, mature, proud, no longer the abandoned girl she once was. The gala night. The Dorchester gleamed with light. Luxury cars lined up at the red carpet, camera flashes sparking non-stop. Amara took a deep breath as she stepped out of the taxi. Edward was waiting. The tuxedo fit his tall frame perfectly, highlighting his broad shoulders. But the look in his eyes when he saw her awed, admiring, laced with unhidden desire, made her heart falter. "You look," he hesitated, then smiled. No, radiant. Amara felt her cheeks burn, but only gave a slight nod. "Let's go." As they entered the grand hall, heads turned. Amara heard the whispers. "Edward Hawthorne isn't alone. Who is she? Looks like an artist." She lifted her chin, remembering Beatrice's words. The banquet unfolded beneath crystal chandeliers. Red wine flowed like streams. Strings played through the air. Edward introduced Amara to his partners without the slightest hesitation. "This is Amara Bennett, a gifted artist and the most important person in my life." Each word fell like a stone dropped into the lake of society gossip. Amara felt both flustered and strangely warmed. Then a cold voice cut in behind them. "How fascinating. Edward, a new taste." Amara turned. Clarissa Wells. She is still tall and elegant in a pearl-embroidered white gown, her face perfectly sculpted. But in those pale blue eyes flickered a shard of venom. "Clarissa," Edward replied evenly. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Of course. The Wells family always supports this hospital. And you must be Amara Bennett?" Clarissa extended her hand, smile stiff. "I've heard many interesting things." Amara shook it, her gaze steady. "A pleasure to meet you." Clarissa tilted her head, syrupy sweet. "Quite bold of you, showing up here. This circle doesn't easily accept outsiders." Amara returned a thin smile. "The art world is the same, Miss Wells. But in the end, true worth decides who stays." At that, Edward squeezed Amara's hand lightly, a silent compliment. Clarissa blinked, her composure cracking for an instant before she turned away. When the orchestra began a waltz, Edward extended his hand. "Will you dance with me?" Amara meant to refuse, but the depth of his blue eyes stopped her. They stepped onto the floor. Music swirled. Their steps moved in uncanny harmony, as if 10 years of distance had never been. "Do you remember our first dance?" Edward whispered. Amara smirked faintly. "You kept stepping on my dress, and you laughed, didn't get angry. That was the moment I knew I'd lost my heart." Amara stumbled slightly, almost missing a step, but Edward's grip steadied her, guiding her on. Her pulse hammered. As the music ended, the hall seemed to fade away. In Amara's eyes, there was only him, and in his eyes, only her. But the night did not end like a dream. On the way home, Amara's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "A little artist thinks she can slip into Hawthorne's world. Don't forget, truth always has a price. You'll regret this." Amara froze. She knew the source, Clarissa, or someone lurking in the shadows. Everything beautiful that had just begun was already under threat. Clutching the phone, she made a vow. This time, she would not run, not like 10 years ago. A week after the gala, the Hawthorne Global Tower blazed across Canary Wharf, but inside it was stifling, like a storm waiting to break. Edward sat in the boardroom on the 40th floor, staring at a screen filled with red charts. The CFO's voice trembled as he reported, "Shares have dropped 13% in 2 days. Rumors of you manipulating the Asian market are spreading fast. The tabloids are in a frenzy. If we don't act immediately, we'll lose more strategic investors." Edward said nothing. Numbers didn't frighten him. He had wrestled with them his entire life. How perfectly orchestrated this felt chilled him, as if someone had laid the trap long in advance. "Blackwell," he muttered, the name hissing through his teeth. That evening, when Edward stepped into the small Shoreditch flat, Amara saw the exhaustion across his face. "What happened?" she asked, touching his arm. He shook his head, shrugged off his coat, and collapsed into a chair. "Rumors. Filthy and dangerous. Gareth Blackwell is behind it. He wants to bring me down." Amara sat beside him, her gaze steady. "What are you going to do?" Edward gave a bitter laugh. "In my world, dirt often works better than the law. But this time, I can't afford to lose everything. Not because of the company, but because of you and Sienna." Her daughter's name made his voice quiver. Amara took his hand. The cold CEO was gone in that moment. Only a worn-out man remained. "You're not alone," Amara said softly. "I'll be here." The next day, headlines flooded the media. The Hawthorne Empire. Billionaire under fraud suspicion. Who is the mysterious woman beside Edward Hawthorne? Amara stood next to Edward in one gala photo, the spotlight catching her uneasy smile. Tabloids dug into her past, branding her a no-name painter chasing a golden ticket. Social media swarmed with venom. Hawthorne's new gold digger. A mixed-race artist. Thinks she belongs in the elite? Pathetic. Amara read, her hands trembling. But when she glanced at Sienna scribbling with crayons at the table, she drew a deep breath and closed the articles. Her daughter could not see her break. Meanwhile, Gareth Blackwell lounged in his Mayfair office, swirling a glass of red wine. Clarissa Wells sat opposite, lips curled. "He's starting to panic," Clarissa said. "Stock is falling, the press is circling, and the public doubts him. A man like Edward only needs a small crack, and the tower collapses." Gareth smirked. Hawthorne always thought himself invincible. Now he'll learn what it means to lose everything. Clarissa tightened her grip on her glass, her eyes flashing. "And when he falls, I'll be the one to rise." Edward never missed a single afternoon picking up Sienna from school through the storm. They walked the narrow streets, stopped for ice cream, and chatted about homework and the neighbor's cat. Those simple moments were the rope holding him back from the abyss. One evening, after tucking Sienna into bed, Edward lingered by her side, watching her clutch a teddy bear, eyelids fluttering. Amara appeared at the doorway. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. Edward turned, eyes bloodshot. "I'm afraid, Amara. Not for me. For you. For her. They won't stop." Amara stepped closer, placing her hand against his cheek. "I survived 10 years on my own. Now we'll survive together. You're not alone anymore." Her words were medicine. Edward pulled her into his arms, allowing himself, for the first time in years, to be weak. But the storm only grew. A law firm delivered notice Monday morning. Blackwell Holdings had filed a lawsuit, accusing Edward of illegal market manipulation. That same day, an anonymous account leaked forged emails proving Edward funneled money offshore. Stocks plunged further. In an emergency meeting, Julian Drake, Edward's loyal right hand, said firmly, "We can strike back, but it'll take time. You have to hold steady, Edward." Edward nodded, but inside he felt like he was standing at the edge of a cliff. That night, Amara opened her laptop and typed a short post. "I'm not a gold digger. I'm an artist. I raised my daughter alone for 8 years, with paint and with these 2 hands. If anyone thinks they can bury truth with rumor, they underestimate the strength of family." The words spread quickly. Fellow artists voiced support. A few independent papers began questioning the accusations against Edward. For the first time in days, Edward saw a flicker of light. He clasped Amara's hand, whispering, "You just saved me." Amara gave a weary smile. "No, I saved us." But Gareth Blackwell had no intention of stopping. In the shadows, he was preparing a final blow aimed not at Edward's company, but his family. Late spring in London was chilly, and the drizzle was blurring the apartment windows. Amara sat before her easel, but her brush froze mid-air. One question looped endlessly in her mind. Was it time to tell Sienna the truth? Her daughter was 8, no longer the child who accepted every lullaby at face value. Each day, Sienna asked more complex questions. Why wasn't my dad here when I was little? Why is he only here now? Mommy, were you ever angry at Dad? Amara could only smile faintly or deflect, but her evasions had grown as fragile as paper before Sienna's sharp, intelligent eyes. That evening, after a simple spaghetti and salad dinner, Sienna tugged Edward's hand as he cleared the plates. "Daddy, I want to ask you something." Edward froze. Amara turned, her heart pounding. "Where were you when I was born?" Sienna's voice was clear, her gaze serious enough to choke Edward silent. He set the plate down and sat beside her. "Sweetheart, it's complicated." He glanced at Amara. She gave a slight nod. It was time. "Back then, your mom and I loved each other, but there was a big misunderstanding, and she thought I didn't want to stay. So she raised you alone." "What misunderstanding?" Sienna pressed. Amara swallowed hard. "Someone tricked me, made me believe your father had abandoned us. I was scared, so I never told him about you." Sienna's brow furrowed, her eyes bright with tears. "So, all that time, you didn't even know I existed?" Edward pulled her into his arms, voice trembling. "That's right, and it's the greatest pain of my life. I would have been there from the first day if I'd known." The little girl was silent, then suddenly burst into tears. "I'm angry at both of you. Why do grown-ups let misunderstandings ruin everything? I was alone for so long." Amara broke down, clutching her daughter. "I'm sorry, Sienna. I was wrong, but I only wanted to protect you." Edward laid a hand on both of them, whispering, "I can't give back the years we lost, but I promise from now on, not a single day will pass without me by your side." In that small kitchen, the three held one another, tears mingling both grief and the beginning of healing. But outside, the storm prowled. Gareth Blackwell launched a new campaign, hiring journalists to dig through Amara's past, unearthing every dark corner, old debts from her student days, even love letters she had once written to Edward. Tabloid headlines screamed, "Amara Wilson, from poor girl to billionaire's mistress, a calculated climb." Edward slammed the paper on the table. "He wants to paint you as a gold digger, making Sienna ashamed of her mother." Amara bit her lip. "I can endure it, but Sienna can't. She'll read it. Her friends will mock her." Edward's eyes blazed. "I won't let that happen. It's time to strike back." The next day, Edward appeared live on national news. His voice rang steady. "I'm not perfect. I lost 8 years of fatherhood because of a vile scheme. But I am proud of Amara Wilson, the woman who raised my daughter alone and made her the incredible girl she is today. If anyone dares to smear her, they will answer to me." The words spread like wildfire. Public opinion split. Some criticized, but many were moved. On Twitter, "Stand with Amara" trended worldwide. Sienna secretly watched the clip on her phone. When Edward came into the room, she threw herself into his arms. "Daddy, I'm proud of you for protecting Mommy." Edward's throat tightened as he held his daughter close. Yet the victory was fleeting, a spark of sunlight in the storm. Gareth Blackwell had readied a deadlier strike, a dossier proving Edward had embezzled funds from an investment pool in Singapore. If released in court, it could destroy not only his career but also his right to custody. That night, Edward sat in his study, the yellow lamp casting shadows over his weary face. Amara entered quietly, laying a hand on his shoulder. "You can't carry this alone. Let me fight with you." Edward lifted his hollow eyes. "I'm afraid, Amara, not of losing money or reputation, but of losing you and her." She sat beside him, locking eyes. We lived in the dark for 10 years. Now our daughter knows the truth. Don't let fear control us anymore. We're a family, and family doesn't abandon each other in the storm." Edward was silent, then gripped her hand tightly. He felt a fragile calm inside the chaos for the first time in weeks. The next morning, Sienna placed a piece of paper on the breakfast table. On it was a wobbly drawing, 3 people holding hands in front of a house, the word home scrawled above. "I don't need castles or fancy cars," she said firmly. "I just need Mommy and Daddy, together." Edward and Amara met each other's eyes. The truth was evident. This family was their greatest strength against every force waiting outside. London woke under a shroud of rain. Outside the Royal Courts of Justice, dozens of cameras pointed toward the stream of sleek cars pulling up. The trial between Edward Lyle and Gareth Blackwell had become the media's obsession, like a political derby wrapped in finance. Inside the car, Amara gripped Edward's hand. In the back seat, Sienna's curls fell loose as her wide eyes darted to the swarm of reporters. "Mommy, they're taking pictures of us." Amara stroked her hair. "You don't have to be afraid. We're here for the truth." Edward drew a long breath. "I used to walk into courtrooms as the man in control. Today, I only want to be a father who proves to his daughter he's worthy." The courtroom was packed, every bench filled with eager faces hungry for headlines. Across from them, Gareth Blackwell sat casually, his tailored suit immaculate. At his side, Collier Winters smirked, her golden hair gleaming under the lights, her half-smile a provocation. The hearing began. Gareth's lawyer rose, voice sharp as steel. "Your Honor, we will show that Mr. Edward Lyle not only deceived shareholders and embezzled funds in Singapore, but also deliberately concealed an illegitimate child. This demonstrates a character unfit for public trust and dangerous to a child's upbringing." Each word stabbed at Amara. The courtroom rippled with murmurs. Reporters hammered at keyboards the headline "Billionaire Betrayal," and a hidden child would soon be everywhere. Edward stood, steadier than he had looked in weeks. "These accusations are lies. I never embezzled a penny, and my daughter Sienna is not a secret. She is my pride, my reason for fighting." His gaze swept the room, landing squarely on Gareth. "The man sitting there is the one hiding the truth." Marcus Chen, Edward's lead counsel, presented thick binders of evidence. Exhibit 1, emails from Collier's personal account to Gareth, plotting to twist the truth and paint Amara as a gold digger. Bank transfers of hundreds of thousands from Gareth's firm to a private investigator who had stalked Amara for years. And finally, an audio recording of Gareth and Collier. "If we can't break him in the boardroom, we'll strike at his private life." The child is the sharpest blade. The courtroom froze. Faces that had been smug turned pale. Gareth faltered, though he quickly straightened, spitting, "Fabrications." Marcus replied crisply, "All verified by independent forensic experts. This, Your Honor, is nothing but a vile conspiracy to destroy a family." During recess, Amara embraced Sienna in the hallway. The girl looked up, her eyes swimming with fear and pride. "Daddy spoke so well. I think people were surprised. But Mommy, do you think they'll believe him?" Amara smiled, wiping her tears. "Belief doesn't come all at once, but truth has its own strength. Just remember we're here for love, not revenge." Edward approached, kneeling before his daughter. "Sienna, whatever happens, remember this. You are not anyone's weapon. You are our heart." She nodded, hugging him tight. That afternoon, Marcus called a surprise witness, Mirabelle Sinclair, the proud gallery owner and Amara's longtime friend. Standing tall, she addressed the judge. "I witnessed Amara raise her daughter alone. She never begged, never leaned on anyone. If anyone here deserves to be called opportunistic, it's those exploiting the press to tear down women." Her sharp words made Collier's face blanch. Before stepping down, Mirabelle glanced at Sienna and winked. "Your mother is a warrior, child. Don't ever forget it." Sienna broke into her first smile of the long day. By the time the court adjourned, the rain had cleared, a rare shaft of sunlight piercing the grey. Outside, reporters jostled for space. Edward raised his arm to shield Amara and Sienna, then spoke firmly into the cameras. "We are not afraid. We will continue to defend the truth. This is not just a financial battle, but about a mother's honor and a child's future. The words echoed across evening broadcasts. A new hashtag surged, family over fortune. That night, back in their modest flat, the three of them ate bread and hot soup at the kitchen table. It was humble, but the warmth was undeniable, like an unspoken vow that their family would not be broken no matter what the court decided. The news from the first trial set all of London ablaze. On television, people saw Edward holding his daughter close, Amara standing beside him with proud, blazing eyes. To the public, they were no longer a cold billionaire and an unknown painter. They were a real family, caught in the whirlwind of power and lies. But Gareth Blackwell was not finished. He smashed a wine glass against the table in his penthouse, overlooking the Thames, shards scattering. Collier stood nearby, feigning composure, though her eyes betrayed unease. "This game isn't over," Gareth growled. "If the court won't break him, I'll destroy him another way. He has a company and investors. One poisoned wind, and the whole tower collapses." Collier hesitated. "But the child? The public is siding with them." "Even better," Gareth sneered. "Let them watch Edward fail to protect his own family." 2 days later, disaster struck. Leal Group's financial systems came under a massive cyber attack. Contracts with Asian partners collapsed, and the stock plummeted. Rumors spread like wildfire. Edward Lyle is on the brink of bankruptcy. In the office, chaos reigned, phones ringing, staff rushing, screens bleeding red. Edward stood in the middle, jaw tight. Amara entered with hot coffee and set it on his desk. "You haven't slept in 2 days," she said softly. Edward clasped her hand, his eyes weary yet burning. "I can survive losing everything. But if Gareth harms Sienna, that's what I'll never forgive." Amara squeezed his hand. "Then we prepare. You can lose the company, but you cannot lose our daughter." That night, after Sienna had gone to bed, Amara and Edward sat by the window, the city lights glittering beyond the glass. "What are you thinking?" Edward asked. Amara was pensive. "Maybe we should walk away. Sell the company, leave London, start fresh somewhere else. Paris, or even a small town, as long as we're together." Edward shook his head, fire in his eyes. "I ran once 10 years ago when I let you slip away. I won't run again. Gareth wants me on my knees, but I'll stand, not just for the company but also for Sienna. She needs to see her father fight." Amara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Then I'll fight with you." On the day of the final hearing, the courtroom overflowed. Thousands gathered, waving banners outside. "Leave the family alone. We believe in the truth." Gareth entered with a proud smile that failed to mask the strain in his eyes. He unveiled new evidence, forged documents showing Edward had signed shady loans, leading to hundreds of millions in losses. The room tensed. Reporters whispered, "Maybe this time Edward won't escape." But Marcus Chen rose, voice ringing clear. "Your Honor, we can prove these documents originated from Gareth Blackwell's personal server. We call a cybersecurity expert to testify." Line by line, code by code, the expert exposed the fabrication. The courtroom buzzed, Gareth's face drained, sweat beading at his temple. "Still," he roared, "lies! You're all conspiring." Edward stood, eyes cold as steel. "No, Gareth, this is your end." Outside the court, rain poured in torrents. Reporters surged, cameras flashing. The crowd cheered when the judge dismissed all charges against Edward and ordered a criminal investigation into Gareth. Amara swept Sienna into her arms. The girl sobbed. "Mommy, does this mean we won?" Edward bent to hold her, his voice breaking. "Yes, sweetheart, we won. Not for money or reputation, but because we didn't let anyone tear our family apart." But Gareth did not vanish so easily. That night, Edward received word at the apartment. Gareth had fled, taking a fortune siphoned from his dirty funds. Amara shivered. "He'll come back. Men like him never accept defeat." Edward wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Then we'll be ready, and next time, we won't just defend, we'll end his shadow for good." In their lit apartment, the family huddled close, exhausted, yet their eyes shone with hope. Outside, London roared on, but in their embrace, Sienna whispered before drifting to sleep. "Mommy, Daddy, I believe our love is stronger than anything." Edward and Amara locked eyes. In that moment, their daughter's simple words became their sharpest weapon, the one Gareth, with all his wealth and schemes, would never touch. London seemed to exhale after the storm of public opinion and tense days in court. Major newspapers ran the same headline: Lyle cleared, Blackwell on the run. On social media, the photo of Edward holding Sienna and Amara, clasping both hands, symbolized becoming one and love. In the days that followed, Edward deliberately withdrew from the glare. He turned down interviews and shut the company's doors to reporters. "What I need now isn't flashbulbs," he told the board, "but time with my family." Amara smiled faintly when she heard him say it. The man who once fought for every fraction of a percentage point now found joy in walking his daughter to school, having dinner in a small kitchen, or wiping paint-stained tables beside his fiancée. One Saturday afternoon, they drove out of the city. A small wooden house by lavender fields waited a retreat Edward had bought, with a studio for Amara and a garden for Sienna. "I'll plant sunflowers over here," Sienna declared, shoes muddy as she ran. "And over there, a swing so Daddy can push me high." Edward laughed, glancing at Amara. "See, she's already mapped the garden." Amara's eyes shimmered. "This is our real inheritance." That evening, the three of them sat at a table, the breeze carrying the scent of grass and flowers. On the table were simple dishes: pumpkin soup, toasted bread, and an old bottle of wine. "Mommy, Daddy," Sienna piped up after eating, "when will you get married?" "I want to be the flower girl. I want to throw petals on the path." Amara blushed. Edward looked at her, then at their daughter. "Soon, princess. But more important is the promise." "What promise?" "That wherever we are, we'll be together, no more secrets. No one will come between us. Family is forever." Sienna nodded solemnly. "I promise too. I'll always believe in you, even if others say bad things." Amara hugged her, tears spilling down her cheeks. That night, after Sienna slept, Amara and Edward stepped onto the porch. A crescent moon hung above, the garden fragrant in the cool air. "Do you remember that day on Oxford Street?" Amara whispered. Edward squeezed her hand. "How could I forget? You appeared like a wound from the past, painful, but waking me up. If you'd walked away that night, I might never have known I had a daughter." Her voice trembled. "Do you resent me for hiding it?" "I did. But not anymore. You did what you thought best to protect her, and it forced me to realize what matters most. Nothing is worth more than family." They fell into silence, listening to the wind through the trees. Then Edward drew out a small box. Inside gleamed a simple platinum ring with a blue stone catching the moonlight. "Amara Wilson," he said, eyes burning, "I won't promise you the world, but I promise you'll never fight alone again. Will you continue this story with me, as my wife?" Tears brimmed. Amara nodded, smiling through them. "Yes, I've waited 10 years to hear that promise." He kissed her, long and certain. The wedding was simple, held in the back garden. Friends, a few old colleagues, new neighbors, people who no longer cared that Edward had once been a billionaire, only that he was a devoted father. Sienna scattered petals, her white dress fluttering, laughter ringing. "I declare Mommy and Daddy belong to each other now." The crowd erupted in joy. When the rings were exchanged, Amara looked deep into Edward's eyes. Gone was the ruthless executive. Before her stood a man who had known loss and had chosen love. Months later, Amara opened her solo exhibition in Paris. Homecoming's centerpiece is a painting of 3 figures holding hands, a storm breaking behind them as light pours down. The audience was hushed. A critic wrote, "This is more than art. It is testimony that family and truth can triumph over deceit." Edward stood by her side, hand in hand with his daughter. Beneath the warm lights, they knew the past had finally closed. On the last night of the exhibition, Sienna hugged them both. "I wish Gareth had never come back." Edward stroked her hair. "He may still be hiding somewhere, but even if he returns, we won't be afraid, because we have each other." Amara added, "And because truth is stronger than lies." Sienna smiled, eyes alight with childlike faith. A year later, sunlight poured over the garden as Edward finished building a swing for Sienna. Amara sat on a bench, her belly rounded with new life. "Push me higher, Daddy," Sienna squealed. Edward laughed, sending her soaring. Amara watched, heart brimming. The past was a closed chapter. They were writing something new built on love, truth, and courage. In the breeze, Amara whispered toward the sky, "This is the eternal promise that this family will never again be swallowed by darkness." And Sienna's laughter rang out, pure and bright, like a bell heralding their peaceful beginning.